In the spring of 1799, a reindeer herder in Siberia named Osip Shumikov notices a strange dark mass melting out of an icy riverbank. The next summer he returns. More of the mass is visible, but not enough to tell what it is. The third year, something new has emerged. A tusk. After another 2 years, the ice has completely melted and revealed what was trapped inside. A woolly mammoth. 20 feet long, 11 feet tall, more than 35,000 years old, perfectly preserved in the ice. He harvests the tusks and sells them to a merchant from Yakutsk. This town has become one of Russia's most important trade hubs. With the empire growing, expeditions are pushing deeper into Siberia looking for new resources to trade, and they've found one. They're encountering merchants selling ivory from animals they've never seen before. Walruses, narwhals, and elephants. But elephants can't live in Siberia, so how's that possible? The Siberians harvesting these tusks say they come from an animal that burrows underground and dies if it reaches the surface, but scholars in Enlightenment Europe have plenty of theories of their own. These are the horns of unicorns, the bones of giants. They're usually found by the water, so they must come from a sea monster. A flood washed elephants out of the tropics and into Siberia. Elephants used to be adapted to the cold. Siberia used to be tropical. Some saw mammoth skulls with this hole for the trunk and assumed it was a cyclops. The Russian Empire is also sending scientists to Siberia, including Mikhail Adams. He's in Yakutsk collecting plant samples when a merchant tells him about a mammoth found further north. He arranges a last-minute expedition and travels more than 1,000 kilometers, reaching the mammoth 3 months later. It's been scavenged, missing a leg, most organs, the trunk, but most of the skin and skeleton is intact, and the mammoth still has fur, 2 layers of thick, insulating fur. He grabs what's left, loading it onto boats and sledges to be taken back to St. Petersburg. A decade earlier, French zoologist Georges Cuvier had proposed a controversial explanation for elephants in Siberia, comparing elephant and mammoth skeletons to show that these were 2 different species and that mammoths were gone. The first significant proof that a species could go extinct at all. This Siberian mammoth, with its double-layered fur, showed that mammoths had lived in the Arctic. That Cuvier was right. In the following decades, Siberian mammoths would help to fuel the first Ice Age theories, Darwin's theories on natural selection, and the development of the field of paleontology. The mammoth is central to some of the most important scientific discoveries. And here it was. Not bones, not legends, but the whole thing, quite literally frozen in time. I want to explore this concept, ice as a geological archive. So I started reading about stories frozen in the ice, these time capsules that are now emerging. And I reached out to a team of scientists who've been tracking the glacier's retreat for the past 40 years. What I found is that the ice is nothing short of a geological memory, and we're losing those memories faster and faster. If you've seen a few of my videos, chances are you've seen Eric Matt. We've been traveling and making videos together for the last few years, and Eric shot this entire video. All the footage you see of the scientists, that's all him. And he crushed it. This video is gorgeous. I can't wait for you to see it. He's an incredible photographer, filmmaker, he's building a nonprofit. The man is a gem, so show him some support and enjoy the beautiful images he shot for this project.
So what is the plan for today's objective?
So we're going to be working on the Daniels and Lynch Glacier. The Daniel is really the last glacier in this Clay Elm River watershed up here. Then the Lynch Glacier is one of the remaining glaciers in the Skykomish River watershed, one of 3. So we go up there and we measure the actual amount of melt and snow accumulation on the glacier so we can give you an annual number. Just like going to the doctor, you stand on the weight scale and you get your blood pressure. That's what we're doing for the glacier. You can map it over time and watch how that changes, its overall area and volume, and it gives you an annual climate record. Both glaciers were melting rapidly last year. They're both pretty steep glaciers, so probably our biggest challenge isn't doing the measurements, but just navigating the glaciers. Yeah, going up looks like a safer route. Yeah, it's been interesting over the years how much more difficult it is to reach the glaciers. Snow just fills in stuff. It fills in all the gorges, covers up a lot of rough topography. Obviously, a lot of loose rock is exposed when it melts. Instead of putting our crampons right here, and just zipping across snow slopes over to the glacier, which ended right over here. We've got to descend every rock rib and then go across all this loose rock to try to get back onto the ice, which is then ever steeper. So in general, climbing routes just get harder as the glaciers disappear. Crampons, your point, use that ice axe with some force. Self-arrest on ice once you get going isn't great, so your best tactic is just to hammer it in. When I started this project in 1984, I anticipated doing it for 50 years and that some of the glaciers would disappear. The difficulty of reaching and navigating the glaciers as they shrink is not something I could have anticipated, because you could think, all right, they'll get easier, but in fact they get a lot steeper. I guess the other surprising thing is that I had the chance to work with my daughter Jill for 16 years in a row, and I didn't really anticipate that would happen.
Growing up, me and my siblings had the opportunity, if we wanted to come help out once we were strong enough to backpack for a while, to come join. Definitely at the beginning, which is kind of along for the ride, a little overwhelmed, but having a lot of fun with it. And, it evolved where now we co-direct the project together. At the beginning, I think it was just like loving the opportunity to come out, to spend that time with my dad, to be in these places and get to experience them. But then it evolved to wanting to create something more from that, something unique, because science, it's hard to have science that is 40 years going.
Glaciers form when snow accumulates year over year. Their structure reflects that, with the youngest ice on top and the oldest ice on the bottom. Each layer of snow accumulation is essentially a time capsule of that year, trapping gases, dust, water, and air bubbles that provide a sample of the Earth's atmosphere at that point in the past. Scientists can retrieve and study these time capsules by drilling ice cores, long tube-shaped samples of the ice. In Greenland and Antarctica, where the ice sheets are several kilometers thick, ice cores yield a geological record stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. They preserve ash and gas from volcanic eruptions, smelting of lead during the Iron Age, radioactivity from nuclear testing and the Chernobyl disaster, and most importantly, they yield an incredible insight into the history of the Earth's climate. Artifacts frozen in ice provide new opportunities for science as it melts, but the data within the ice is different. As the ice melts, this knowledge is washed away with it.
We're going up to the former iceworm glacier, just checking out how it's changed since kind of last year. We declared it was no longer a glacier. It's kind of just stagnant snow and ice now. And so we'll kind of check out how that remnant snow and ice has changed since last year. And yeah, it's a familiar spot for me, a friend in a way. And so it's really getting to see it one more time.
Why are you so fascinated with glaciers, and why is it that you've chosen to dedicate your life to them?
Most things are relatively static year to year, but glaciers change a lot from year to year, just in terms of, did they have a lot of snowfall that year? Was there a big avalanche? Did an iceberg calve? Did a new lake form? Whatever. You feel a bit like you're an explorer as they change, traveling across terrain that is different than before. You have an expectation that the glaciers aren't going to be the same the next year, and so that is what you expect. The only weird part is when a glacier actually disappears. It doesn't do it overnight, so it's not surprising, but it is striking. When I first came up here in the 1980s, I'd always ski from this spot down on the Iceworm Glacier. We had to do our measurements all the way up here, so we had to come up to this ridge. And then, hey, might as well have fun on the way down. So, turn away on down to the glacier. And right now it looks like a death-defying feat, and I can assure you it wasn't.
Were there any years that things changed significantly more than you expected them to?
The last two. I mean, it went from... It lost half of its area. Usually glaciers are treated by percentage. It lost 5, 10, 20% at the most. But when you talk about a glacier losing 50% of its area in 2 years, that's an amazing rate.
This water is part of supplying a lot of eastern Washington, which is where a lot of the agriculture and farms are, and wineries and all of that. So it's not going to be good.
How has that been affecting the emotional process behind everything, or like your inspiration to keep going and keep documenting?
It's a mixture, you know. I think it spurs you to tell the story, to keep documenting it, and crushes you at the same time. People, to relate, you'd have to think about your favorite campground, your favorite beach, your favorite waterfall, and you just watch it disappear and it's gone, and that place is lost. And if it was where you took your family every year for 40 years or whatever, where your grandparents took you, and somebody who that spot was special to would be hurt by that.
In 2011, on a high mountain pass in Norway, archaeologists find something strange melting out of an ice patch. A wool tunic worn 1,700 years ago. Over the next decade, they returned to the site, finding more than 1,000 artifacts along the edge of the ice. More clothing, tools, cookware, arrows, skis and sleds, a dog with a collar and a leash, a stone shelter. Notably, the artifacts include horseshoes, horse snowshoes, hundreds of horse bones, and a string of rock cairns. Indications that researchers have found what some refer to as a Viking highway, an important route used to travel the surrounding landscape. These artifacts, preserved in the ice, paint a picture of how the societies in this region moved. Not just their migration route, but how they responded to changes in the world around them. Its earliest use, right around 300 CE, coincides with a population boom during a favorable climate. Its busiest around 1000 CE, a time of expanding populations, trade, and urbanization. And it dries up in the 1300s, around the start of the Little Ice Age and the Black Plague. Today, this pass has become a key site for a new field called glacial archaeology. Rather than digging, researchers search the edges of the ice as it melts. And they're on the clock. As soon as these artifacts are out of the ice, they'll start to decompose. If no one finds them, these memories are lost. Melting ice has revealed artifacts all over the world. Alaska, Siberia, the Alps. A mountain pass in Switzerland has revealed a similar travel route, with artifacts dating back more than 6,000 years. And chances are you're familiar with Otzi the Iceman, a 5,000-year-old mummy found in the Italian Alps, stunningly preserved by a glacier, and offering further insights into the ways humans of the past have moved through the mountains.
Whenever you're ready. Nice. Look at him go.
The changes are everywhere as we hike into the glaciers too. One of the advantages of not taking a helicopter in is we have to hike all the way to the glacier. So you see changes in plants that are stressed out. We see changes in the lakes, changes in the streams coming from the glaciers, and then the glaciers themselves. A glacier like the one in this basin that has lost 90% of its area. The stream itself is barely a trickle where it used to be a nice flow in August, and then downstream, obviously, that's going to have effects. Just the whole landscape is changing.
In 2012, researchers in Alaska find an entire forest melting out of a glacier. Tree stumps more than 2,000 years old, still upright, with intact roots, bark, and tree rings providing a record of this forest's past, before it was buried under the ice. More than 1,000 years ago, this glacier advanced. Rocky debris at the edge of the ice surrounded and stabilized the bases of the trees, locking them in place before the ice buried them. Around the same time, researchers on Canada's Ellesmere Island make a similar but smaller discovery: moss growing out of a retreating glacier. The moss had been frozen in the ice more than 400 years ago, but as the glacier retreats, it's being exposed to air and sunlight and has started to grow again, right at the edge of the ice. And in 2019, researchers in Greenland noticed a dark mass along the edge of a melting glacier. A well-preserved section of soil containing the remains of plants, mosses, shrubs and trees, water lilies, beetles, midges, and even a new extinct plant species, previously unknown to science. It paints a picture of a past landscape and climate very different from the Arctic today, a boreal forest with bogs and lakes. The sample was dated to the early Pleistocene, more than 2 million years ago. But the wildest example of unexpected life within a glacier can be found right here in the North Cascades.
I mean, ice worms they look like black threads that are ½ to 1 inch long. They live on glaciers only. They don't like sunlight, so during the day, they'll be hiding in the snow. On the surface of the ice, we'll see some in like melt pools. They can lay out as long as they're in freezing cold water. So one thing we've done over the last 40 years is measure the stream flow right here. Everything you see here, whether it's snow or glacier, as it melts, it's coming right through this little channel. And we'll measure the depth, width, and velocity and get the discharge through here. If we look at how much we get on your average August day now versus the flow we had here 40 years ago, it's less than 30%. Every aquatic organism that lives in this creek will be influenced by it. This goes into the Clay Island River. The next glacier over goes into the Clay Island River. So cumulatively, the Clay Island River has less flow all the way to Clay Island Reservoir. We're mapping the surface elevation of the glacier, so we go at 50-meter intervals. We have a laser ranger that measures the slope, vertical distance, angle. So you do that every year, and you get a little line that shows you where the surface of the glacier is. And the next year you do it, the line's down here and down there.
And she goes.
We're exploring this really cool ice tunnel, ice cave feature that's in the former iceworm glacier. So it's one cool thing about the glacier melting away, and stuff is good to explore the crazy stuff like this that happens. It's just really melting out and forming this crazy tunnel kind of near the top of where the glacier was. So we're checking it out safely. We're just kind of learning about what does happen when a glacier disappears, because I think that's not a story that most people have seen until now. Sometimes just going to explore something and take note of it and photograph it and learn about it is just as important as kind of the hard science measurements that someone takes.
Why was it that you started this project?
I was trying to think of what niche wasn't being filled by scientists. The National Academy of Sciences had noted that nobody was monitoring multiple glaciers across an entire mountain range. And at the time, the U.S. Geologic Survey is the only place that could do it. But they were undergoing some substantial budget cuts. You realize that, all right, nobody else is going to do this. And that's always a good place to find yourself. I stayed dry going in, but not coming out.
Reading about these mysteries solved by ice, I started to wonder if there were any open cases. Mysteries that haven't been solved, with answers still locked in the ice. One story immediately came to mind. In 1921, a team of British climbers set out to make a first ascent of the world's highest peak. They mapped the surrounding terrain, scouted potential routes, and they took photos. Porters carried heavy gear used to capture and even develop images high on the mountain. These photos were intended to help survey and find routes, but they were also some of the first images of this landscape. The team used these images to generate publicity and finance more expeditions, returning the next year to set up a series of high camps, and in 1924 to make a final push for the summit. On the morning of June 6th, climbers George Mallory and Sandy Irvin left high camp, aiming for the summit. Irvin carried a camera with the intention of photographing Mallory at the top. 2 days later, they were briefly spotted about 800 feet below the summit before disappearing into the clouds. They never came back. 29 years later, Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary successfully reached the summit. No one knows if Mallory and Irvin reached it first. In the centuries since, clues have trickled in. Irvin's ice axe, alleged sightings of their bodies near the summit, and even Mallory's remains discovered in 1999. But the smoking gun, Irvin's remains, the camera in his pocket, and the undeveloped film inside was never found. But 2 weeks ago, right after I finished this video, a National Geographic expedition found something melting out of one of Everest's glaciers. A shoe and a sock. A sock with a label. Not a body or a camera, but a huge clue to where they might be. 100 years later, the search for Irvin's camera is still one of exploration's biggest mysteries. It shows how a moment can be frozen and preserved, both by ice and by an image.
So we started our first field season in 1984, and then in the 25th year, my daughter Jill started to come. And after her first year, I talked to her about, the data that we're collecting isn't really effectively communicated to the public in like a table. Her challenge was to figure out how to do that using art.
I think that a lot of people feel disconnected to data, kind of picturing what that looks like in real life. Like even if they see a graph and understand like a glacier is changing, that's not the same. I think it's that emotional component especially that people can connect to and what you can show just with like the beauty of the visuals in art. My paintings that I do, like I'm doing right now in the field, are definitely capturing like a certain point of time, and they're ways for me to like be really present and observe things about the landscape. And I can share the painting I did last year of Iceworm Glacier. It was all bare ice basically last year, maybe a tiny bit of old snow at the top. This one from last year was Easton Glacier on Mount Baker, all blue ice on the lower part where there should be snow, big ice fall. These two waterfalls, the ice was covering those the year before, and all the dark brown is like all this crappy mud and rocks that is making it hard to get on the glacier.
What is it about Jill and Maury's project that drew you to it?
These guys are capturing a fleeting resource, and so much more than a resource, a fleeting source of inspiration. I think the sort of ephemeral nature of our shared subject is what brings us all here. Today, here at Iceworm, I've painted the iceworm itself and this melt pond situation. In this piece, I'm hoping to add some lines like I did in previous pieces here to chart where the glacier has been. So 1984 went to the far end of Small Pond. What other years were major sort of landmarks? If I was going to put every place I depict is a place that is giving me something. I think I've always had a nature journal going and tried to use my art practice as a way to capture different places, different moments in time when I was in those places.
If ice is a geological memory, art is a cultural one. Maury and Jill are assembling a body of research and bringing attention to the present and future of these glaciers. But they're also building an archive, a way to look back in time and see these places after they're gone, and to know that they were important to someone. Ice has solved our mysteries, recalled things we've lost. It's told our story. The ice remembers us. And thanks to people like Maury and Jill, people who've dedicated their lives to telling its story, I think we can return the favor. I think we can remember.
What do you think, Jill?
I'm so excited we got here, and we had a tough time getting here, but it was really worth it, and going on to the Lynch was much more doable. So I'm feeling really happy now.
How about you, Maury?
We got to the Daniels, we got to the Lynch, we did it. Who knows if we'll be able to do them another year, but We got them this year. And we'll learn. We'll try a different route down and see if that's the solution for the future.
What's it been like for you to grow such a strong connection with your daughter over a shared passion? In science, but just in life, collaborations are really beneficial. Or strong collaboration just advances what you're trying to do so much. We're out here collecting data every day, but probably the things that stand out to me are those moments when you see somebody that you're working with really have an epiphany or just a moment of growth, a period of growth. And so the collaborations we have when people really can take this experience and use it to make a step forward in their life, it's also a really rewarding part of this.